week so far. Hopefully this is going to be the main course or the dessert to your week. Craig and I are really excited to be talking to you today about the 4 pillars of organizational design. So welcome everyone that's come in early. We're going to get going in a couple of minutes. We're going to just wait for a couple of minutes just for people who might be coming off Zoom or Teams or chat before we kind of get going. But Craig, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you, Joe. I'm sat here wondering where the sun has gone because it feels like we've had our summer already come and go as we do in the UK. So I'm currently staring out of a window right in front of me, which currently looks a bit gloomy in the southwest today. So yes, I am up. I'm ready. I do feel sorry for anyone who's coming off a Teams call at 9:15 in the morning. That is an early start, and
It is.
if you're joining us off a Teams call, welcome. Hopefully, it'll be less intense than an 8 o'clock call on a Thursday morning. But yes, doing very well, very well. Looking forward to the session today. And how are you, Joe? You've been up and at the gym this morning.
I've been at the gym, and I was saying to you before we came, I'm not sure I can move my arms by the end of the day. They put my weights up, which is a sign of strength. So, I kind of, got a positivity. Let's remember the values. The best is yet to come. But I think by the end of the day, yeah, my arms will be. And tomorrow, we've got a big pitch tomorrow. So I need to get some sleep and maybe I don't know, maybe I won't be showing my hands as much, Mrs. Jazz hands here.
Well, I think we're very lucky that all we got to do this morning is click. So as long
I
as we're
know,
clicking
I
around,
know.
not too much arm movement. So if we don't
No.
see any arms coming up, we now understand why. But also just to say, I can't see my chat this morning. So the best technology in the world, purpose-built webinar technology sometimes doesn't work. So if I'm ignoring questions that come through, if I'm ignoring people who are saying, hello, Craig, please repeat that. Joe, please do stop me. Because at the moment I'm not seeing anything. So at the moment it just feels like me and you have a nice chat this morning, Joe.
Oh, well, there's nothing better than having a nice chat on a Thursday morning. But we should jump into it in a minute. But it would be great. You know a little bit more about Craig and I, and we'll kind of do proper intros in a second. But it'd be great to get to know you. So in the final minute before we kind of we warm you up. Before we dive into the content today, it would be great to know who you are. So if you could put into the chat, even though Craig can't see it, and I'll read it out to him, who you are and the organization that you work for. Always helpful to know who we're talking to. It's just nice, to be honest with you. Can't see you, can I?
If anyone attended my Learning at Work Week webinar 2 weeks ago, you will remember I asked you what beverage you were drinking or accompanying you this morning. So there won't be, this is a no judgment zone. If it's not tea, coffee, or a soft drink, there is no judgment, but we'd love to know. If you're sat there with a glass of wine on a Thursday, wherever you are in the world, it could be very late in the day.
Exactly. It could be after 5 o'clock, couldn't it? So you never know. So we've got Steph. She's a people partner based in the UK. We've got Sarah, an HR advisor from Hull. We've got Sandra, brilliant, Met Office, Southwest base, Craig. Another Sarah, talent manager in Manchester, sipping a Lemsip, has got an awful cold. Oh dear.
Oh no.
Good. Sorry about that. I'm a bit snotty, so apologies if I go on mute when Craig's talking. Lisa from Scotland in Glasgow. Solihull. We've got Carly from Brighton. Carly, welcome. Nice to see you again. People director from Brighton drinking coffee. Caroline, Jess, Venetia, Morven, Melody, brilliant. Thank you so much. What a lovely welcome. Thanks, Gemma, for putting in about you. So let's get going, shall we, Craig? And chat to you all about 4 pillars of organizational design. So for those of you that don't know us, I'm Joe. I'm MD of Let's Talk Talent. And our aim and purpose as a business is to help you get, keep and grow brilliant people. It's no more complicated than that. We pride ourselves on making the complex really simple and using creative tools to bring that employee experience so that you create irresistible organizations for your people. We've been around for 10 years. I can't believe it. Our 10th year, our anniversary, our birthday is coming up in a couple of months. So watch out for more news on that. But if you've joined a webinar, you kind of know the format. We really want to chat to you about all things OD today, but we're very happy to answer any questions that you may have. So keep them coming, even though Craig can't see them. I will be keeping us on the straight and narrow. And we've got the wonderful Hannah in the background, making sure that we stick to time. So we get you out by 10 o'clock, but also that she flags the questions to us. So welcome, everybody. And thank you so much for participating today. So before we jump in and we start to tell you what we think about OD and the 4 pillars, I want to know from you, when I say the term organizational design, what do I mean? What do you think I'm talking about? Because a lot of people talk about OD and they think organizational development or they think talent management. But what do I actually mean by organizational design? Take a moment and put your thoughts into the chat.
I always find, Joe, as well, people throw the word OD around a lot.
100%.
And sometimes you're left to assume whether people mean organizational design, organizational development. And
100%.
it can be confusing. We love an acronym in HR. So actually defining what it means up front is a really good start.
Absolutely. And it can, it changes over time, right? Some people talk about target operating models when they're talking about organizational design. As you say, there can be organizational development when you talk about OD. But what do you think? This is ask the audience. What do we mean by organizational design? Any ideas? Lisa says the arrangement of org staff, system, structure, skills, etc., to achieve its objectives. Kelly says have design of systems, processes, and people. Gemma, having the right people, skills, and experience in the right place.
Gemma's seen it before, I think.
I think you've read my slide, haven't you? Well, Lisa, Kelly, Gemma, you're bang on. We want to take the complex and make it super simple. So for us as simple souls, we believe that organizational design in its absolutely simplest form is having the right people in the right roles with the right skills doing the right things. And we're going to show you a foolproof model that's going to help you think through how you do that. And Craig's going to take us through that in a minute. But when you're asked about OD, this is what you should say. It's no more difficult than that. Yes, you can get a qualification in OD. You can look at restructures, all of it. But actually, when you're talking about it and you're thinking about what you need to do, is the right people, right roles, right skills, right things. Make sense? Okay. So why does OD matter at the moment? And, I'm not going to talk about the Trump effect. We've got the economic downturn in the UK. The world is really volatile and changeable. And I say it every single time I do this webinar. And when I talk to, HR directors, we are in an absolute COVID hangover, number one. And we've never seen so much disruption from technology than in my lifetime. I was talking to this with my dad. You think about my father's generation, they didn't have computers, they didn't have mobile phones, and in his lifespan, he's now 77. Look at what technology has done. We're at the cusp of what this can do. And OD is going to play a massive part in thinking about some of those nutty problems that exist and that are bigger than we can ever imagine. But if you need a business case about why OD matters, we've done some global research. And there's 4 areas I kind of want you to think about. The first is that organizations with strong change management The propensity to change and be flexible and agile are 6 times more likely to meet their audacious goals. Whether that's revenue, whether that's new products, new services. So really thinking about how you change and you pivot, and having leaders that can do that. And strong HR capability in change management is going to be really critical going forward. Companies with engaged employees, so we're going to have change fatigue, we're going to see redundancies, we're going to see a stop in terms of development, are outperforming peers by 147%. So now is the time to invest in growing and keeping great people. Effective OD interventions, when they're done really well, and we're going to show you how to do them, show an average ROA of over 600%. I mean, that's huge. We all know when things go wrong, that the after effect that can last for years. But really being planful and thinking through these pillars, which we're going to talk to you about, can give you a massive return on investment. And if you're thinking about investing anything at the moment in OD and change, it's leadership development. According to McKinsey, leadership development programs linked to 25% higher organizational performance. So if you have it's a no-brainer if you're investing in change, transformation, strategic direction, new products, new services, AI, whatever it is. OD is going to be a massive pillar in your strategy. And here they are some of the global research highlights that will help you build that business case to start planning really purposefully. So when you think about that, and you think about all the things that I've talked about, what is the biggest organizational challenge that you in your organization has at the moment? I'd love to hear about it. Is it, staff retention? Is it leadership development? Is it AI transformation? Is it organizational structures, salaries, generations, diversity? What is your biggest organizational design challenge, do you think? Is it capability, capacity? I'm throwing loads of things at you, but what is the biggest challenge that you see? Again, I'm asking the audience, tell me what you think.
And I think, Joe, just to share my perspective, because I'm in a really unique position, I talk to people about their challenges probably on a daily basis. Maybe I should take up a new role, maybe, and spend time talking about personal challenges. I don't know. But I find, especially with OD at the moment, there's a big thing. I think lots of people are talking about the impact of technology.
Yeah.
And AI, augmented, generative AI, how that all operates and works together, but how that impacts on people. So how the skills that people have today are going to differ even next year, let alone 100%. In 3 years, and how that's going to impact on their strategy and efficiency and effectiveness as an organization. That's a huge one that seems to be on people's radar at the moment, because it's changing so quickly. If you think of January to May, where we are now, there's been huge inroads in AI and integration in AI and what we're doing. So actually, even that short period of time, think of that times, and it's only accelerating, which is scary, but also fascinating.
It is. I mean, that plays to what people are saying. They're saying, Jackie said period of rapid growth. Carly said structure due to acquisition integration. Lisa said leadership capability and capacity. Jessica says digital transformation, leadership, career paths, structures, change in strategic direction, leadership capability. So you're feeling what we're feeling. So it's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's super, super helpful. Craig.
Perfect. The role of...
Sorry, it's me. Is this me? Yes. Sorry. I'm giving him the cue too early. Apologies. So look, if you're thinking about your role of an OD practitioner, here are some ideas that we have. So if you're thinking about upskilling yourself in OD, we're going to give you some tools at the end. We've got a playbook, and we also run a workshop to upskill HR teams on OD. But really, the role of an OD practitioner, when you're thinking about all of these challenges, leadership, digital transformation, structure, is first of all, diagnose the organizational issues using some proven frameworks. So you might have some frameworks in place. You might use our framework that we've got that we're going to go through in a minute. So think about how you're diagnosing the problem. What data have you got? What's it telling you? Where are the gaps and opportunities? Design those interventions that are really targeted, but make sure that they're aligned with the business need. So if you're, have mergers and acquisitions, a couple of you said, looking at structure, thinking about what does the business need. So going back to the basics of right people in the right roles with the right skills, doing the right thing. Build capability for sustainable performance. So this is the skills-based economy. This is about leadership capability. So, this is not about you leading this on your own. This is about building OD capability within the business and drive that meaningful change with measurable results. Think about when you're going into any OD, whether it's structure, whether it's culture, whatever it is, think about what you're measuring and think about that first. Think about that future back, and then you'll design the application of that and the process associated with that in the best possible way.
Cool. And actually looking at that role, when you break it down, it goes across all of these 4 pillars. And when we approach any OD or organizational design project, you can either look at it broad as an entire organization, or you can look at it narrowly. So if you want to look at it from a regional perspective or a team perspective, you can actually apply these 4 pillars across all of those areas. And actually, they are the foundations of what establishing a highly efficient and effective organizational team is. And the pillars that we look at are structure, process, culture, and capability. So these are the 4 pillars that we're going to be going through. And by no means is this a sequential model. We're not saying you have to start with structure first and work through it in that way. Because actually what you may find is some projects you may look at 3 of the 4 pillars and only have a consideration of the other, whereas at other projects you may go really deep on all of those across all areas themselves. And when we use this methodology, what we do is we look at it across 3 time horizons. We won't go into too much detail around this. It will come to life as we look at the real example later on in the webinar itself. But we look at it from the past, the present, and the future. And that allows us to understand the entire journey. So we're not just looking straight forward and saying what's next. We want to learn what's happened previously and understand where we are now. So you may hear people talk about future back or working future back, because actually we want to aim for a goal, but we need to understand where we are now, but also where we've been and what's worked and what's not worked. And how the wrapper that goes across all of these 4 pillars is the work requirements you want the team or organization to do. So yes, these are the 4 pillars, but think about the output. What are we wanting people to do? How are they driving forward in itself? Now we're going to take a bit more of a deep dive. We're going to start with structure, and they are so many different types of structures. Some have names, some don't have names. People just throw them together, and you can adopt many, many different ones. We're going to touch on 3 this morning, because I think we could have another webinar on all the different types of structures that are available at the moment. And the first one that we're going to look at is the traditional functional structure, which segments team by the work that they do, and it's probably the most common structure in the UK. I haven't got any research to back that up, but just from knowledge and understanding, I would say this is probably the one that's the most common within organisations in the UK at the moment. But many are looking to move away from, as they look to increase agility, flexibility in an ever-changing market. Now, if you need specialisation and high efficiency, this structure is very, very good. Employees are grouped by expertise, so marketing, finance, sales, operations, which means you can actually drive deep functional knowledge and operational efficiency within those departments. However, it can create siloed thinking and poor cross-functional collaboration. Departments become isolated, especially if they're across multiple sites, and that leads to communication breakdowns, duplicating of efforts, and sometimes misaligned priorities. So as we run through these structures, a question to ponder is, how does your current structure support or hinder collaboration, innovation, responsiveness across the organization? So that's one definitely to think about as we run through these different structures. Now, the second, which is a growing one, is the matrix style organization. It doesn't follow the traditional hierarchical models. Well, that's a long word for a Thursday morning. Maybe not enough coffee for hierarchical. Matrix organizations tend to have a small group of those traditional managers, with employees having dual reporting lines. So one into those traditional managers and a dotted line into somebody else. Now, that could be a project lead, it could be a divisional manager, it could be a regional manager, but they have two lines of responsibility. And the main appeal of a matrix organization is that you can provide both flexibility and a more balanced decision-making process, because it's not going to one individual or one department to make that single decision. And actually having one single project overseen by multiple business lines allows for shared resources and more open communication and collaboration across the organization. However, having dual reporting lines can cause confusion, can add complexity to decision making. So actually, where you see it being a fast moving organization, sometimes it can put a barrier into those decision making processes themselves. Now, the last one I want to talk about is network, and it's a little bit more complex. It's the one that normally gets people talking the most. So what I want to do, rather than describing it, I want to illustrate it in a way in which we're going to put ourselves into this organization as a person who works in it right now. So from right now, we are all Bob, and this is the life that we're living in a network organization. So, Bob, we are a product strategist in a global tech organization that operates as a network. So instead of the traditional hierarchy, Bob, we work flexibly in a web of interconnected teams. There's no fixed boss or manager watching over me every day or us every day. Instead, leadership is distributed and based on expertise and not title. So Bob might lead one initiative this quarter, then take a step back into a supporting role in the next month. He collaborates with marketing, he collaborates with design, he has even with external partners seamlessly, and not because he's told to, but because it's how things get done. Decisions are made where knowledge lives. So Bob doesn't need layers of approval. He has the autonomy to act as long as he aligns with the organization's shared purpose and values. Communication is open and transparent, so think of things like Slack channels, working documents, daily check-ins, not memos and chains of command. But it's not always perfect. Sometimes Bob misses the clarity of defined roles. On a recent project, he wasn't sure who had final sign-off. And without a strong culture to anchor him, he might have felt lost in the ambiguity. But in his team, trust and shared accountability, they were able to share that gap. So hopefully that illustrates it in a way. I found it very useful to do it from that perspective. And networks, when we think about it, can be really, really good for organizations that are looking to grow quickly, need the agility and flexibility to adapt to their market, but they can lack on the clarity of roles, decision makings, in actually how they work as an organization. But we are seeing lots of matrix organizations taking more of this approach. So they're becoming a little bit more of a blended organization. So before we dive even deeper into the other areas, what structures are you currently using? So we've spoken about functional, and there's different types of functional. We've talked about matrix. We've talked about network. I'd be really interested if anyone works in a network organization and can relate to Bob, or is very different to Bob. It'd be really, really interesting to hear. But also think about circular organizations. Think about flat. Are you product based? Are you market based? Are you geographically based or structured as an organization? So it'd be really great to share in the chat what's coming through. And Joe, I'm going to rely on you to share with me what's coming through on the chat, if anything, because at the moment I can't see anything coming through because I've got no chat function. Oh, you're still muted, Joe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Functional.
Functional.
Sarah said functional. So we've had one in so far.
Perfect. And functional is it's probably the more traditional that we do see and operate in.
Yeah, function. Everyone that's so Sarah, Jackie, Sarah, Gemma, Melody are all saying functional. Kelly said matrix. Sharon said functional. So mainly functional. It
Lots of
feels
functional coming through.
yeah, which
Well,
is
and
not
that takes a
surprising.
real nice temperature check, actually, that functional is probably the number one at the moment. But again, it's more the traditional. So maybe even looking forward and going, how can we start to evolve that on?
Yeah.
Rather than actually saying, yes, let's move to a 100% matrix or flat or whatever that may be. How do you start to adopt some of those changes to start building it through? And that leads really nicely into process, which is our second pillar. And now when we talk about process or processes, we're not just thinking about policies, procedures. We're now looking at how work actually gets done. The flow, the handoffs, the decisions, and most importantly, whether the processes are helping or hindering your output. So we've added some key considerations of the process on this page. I'm not going to go through all of them. However, what you need to start to think about is when Joe mentioned about the role of the OD practitioner, think about what you're trying to diagnose. So why are you doing it? Change often fails when there's not a good reason for change. Are you being adaptive? So are you reacting to what's going on in the market at the moment? Versus are you being transformational? Are you being proactive? Are you trying to step ahead? Are you starting to change in that way? What does it mean for an individual, an organization, and also a customer? Why does it matter to them? What's in it for them? And where is it coming from and why are you approaching it in that way? Starting with why is a really good way to do that diagnostic perspective to make sure you understand why you're doing it, but also can start to build that story for people to be on that change journey with you. Then we think about how we're going to change it. Are there efficiency gaps? And how are we going to get our processes, ways of working, helping teams to work more smarter? How do we get our people on board on that change journey? So thinking about how we do it across all of these different areas below the text at the top there. And finally, the what. What do you actually need to do to make these changes? What is your action and how do you communicate it? So within these elements, using a methodology like a target operating model as a project can really support this pillar, because ultimately what you're doing is you're utilizing this methodology across all of those to understand, okay, what do we need to do in order to really focus on what process do we need to change? Because that can link really nicely into your structure. So if there's certain processes that aren't working or the way in which people are working isn't working anymore, how can that feed into structure to make sure it actually drives better working efficiencies moving forward? Culture is the secret sauce to ensuring your OD approach really contributes to your mission and purpose. So don't neglect it. Culture is a difficult beast to crack, and which is why we're always talking about it, and mainly because there's so many moving parts. Couple of examples. Say we wanted to drive more collaboration and empowerment across the organization and even in teams. This would suggest a flatter structure would be best or better approach to push forward and for more control over decision making. What you may want is more of a hierarchical approach, so more of a traditional and functional approach may be more suitable. So applying that into the world, this is why we see more public sector organizations or high governance organizations adopting that hierarchy approach. And this could be due to having control of the budget restrictions, especially within that public sector at the moment. Whereas if you've got a highly creative agency, you may opt for more of a flatter structure or a matrix or a network style structure to drive that agility and creativity across the team. If we're looking at innovation and change, however, it's shown that the highest levels of innovation and change are when people engage with people outside of their day-to-day. So their functions, their teams, and they start to work with other people. So based on this, if you're working in a particularly innovative market, how do you encourage teams to collaborate and work to ensure that they're creating the environment for innovation? So that could start to build in those cross-functional teams to make sure that you're driving the right sort of innovation across those. So that's just two examples of quite a long list of culture itself runs through. And then we move into capabilities, which is a two-pronged approach. So you can look at it from a role perspective and a people perspective. Now, remember, we always start with role first, not people, because what you'll tend to do if you're looking at people first is you'll then start to have nice roles made up for those individuals. As much as we think bias isn't there, unconscious bias takes over and we think, yes, we can definitely build a role here. Look at the roles you need first and then see if the people have the capabilities to fit. If not, how do you develop them to get into those? And it's really, really, it's a really great way to do it from a role perspective across these four areas. So I am going to use a methodology of a mechanic. So apologies if there's if you're not to understand garages and mechanics, but looking at it from that perspective. So if you look at pivotal roles, these are the roles that you're going to need in the future. So what are the new things that you need to do in order to achieve your business objectives? So if you're thinking about it from a mechanic perspective, electric cars are coming through at the moment. So actually what they need to do in a pivotal role is invest in those individuals with the skills to be electric mechanics, or in the future, looking forward, maybe even hydrogen cars on the horizon. If we look at operationally critical roles, these are the roles that you need to deliver to ensure the delivery of your business strategy and ongoing service delivery. So this could be someone who is an MOT mechanic. I'm not sure if they're called mechanics or accreditors, but an MOT, someone who does MOTs, because you're always going to need those to make sure that you continue on forward. Sustaining roles are those who are in more established parts of the business. This is the team behind the scenes who are creating all the bookings, invoicing, finance, to make sure that actually the business does run in the way it should do. And then declining roles are those that are responsible for the skills and resources that will decline. So if we think of the traditional cars, the combustion engine, is that going to be around in 20 years? We don't know. So actually the need for those is declining in itself. So it's just a nice way to bring that to life in a different way to make sure that we can start to put those together. So we've been through very quickly those four pillars, and we can do a very quick poll. So it will hopefully pop up on your screen, which pillar presents the biggest opportunity for you? So think about structures. Do you currently work in a functional structure, and does that pose an opportunity to start driving a different approach? Is there elements around your processes or process in which you're going to do it, and how you can impact and have an opportunity in your organization? How about your culture? So does your culture make some growth and development within those areas? And capabilities. Again, this is split both people and roles, even though we've just looked at roles today. So I think if we looked at people, we're going to go down a very, very different off-piste approach if we start looking at people and potential. So Jo, I'm not sure if it has popped up in the chat yet.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah,
through?
it has. We've got a couple of answers in so far, so keep them coming. We've got 2 for structure. So we've got 2 for process, culture 3, capabilities 5, structure now is 4. So we've got culture and capabilities and structure are pretty even, Craig. So feels like actually all of them are kind of integrated in some way, but please keep the answers coming if you want to. But yeah, definitely capability, culture and structure, and process being the last, which makes sense really.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think people do process changes over time are normally quite quick to integrate, and people look at them around how we can make operational efficiencies quite as a more of an organic approach. But capabilities is definitely one that I've seen increase over the last year since we've last did this webinar. I think this time last year actually, that slowly started to increase as the capabilities are changing. But yes, interesting to still see culture and structure as part of those as well. Now, we also wanted to focus on a real world example, because actually it's really nice to talk about the review of an operating model and how they operate. And it's really good to look at it in theory, but actually, how does it work in action? So let's set the scene. The business that engaged with us wanted to review their operating model and make recommendations. So this was to enable them to be best positioned to deliver their strategy moving forwards, but also take into account the organization's significant growth and future aspirations. and also challenging growth targets. So they were in the charity sector. They were in the R&D industry, so research and development. They were about 200 people, but they're only established in 2020. So they were growing quite quickly as an organisation, which posed a big challenge for them around what focus points they go for. And Joe's going to walk us through the approach and what we found from this project itself.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig. So I would say that they were a startup to scale up. They had really ambitious targets. So the approach that we took, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, was future back. And Craig mentioned it, looking at sort of the past, the present, and the future in relation to OD. So in this model that we used with this particular client, we looked future back and we looked at their long-term business objectives. So they had aspirations for the next 5 years. They had a 5-year strategy. So we worked future back from now and thought about what they needed to get to those pivotal points to get them to that particular target, how many people they needed, what structure they needed, and what culture they needed to do that. We drove deep with each of the directors around their talent requirements, so the positions and the people that they needed. We looked at their operating model, so they had a very I would say, because it was R&D and it was in the health sector, quite a medical operating model. Was that actually going to be consumable for their customer ultimately? Were they talking to their customer? And we brought in insights. So we talked to other organizations in that startup to scale up within their particular sector, but also outside of their sector to learn lessons. So we put all of those elements together. So we had data externally, we had data internally, and we were able to kind of look at the gaps and opportunities for that business. And that took a very short space of time. We had to turn this around within a month. They're not small, they're not, they're not big, but there was lots of complication, and getting meetings with people was the biggest challenge. And so where we landed was we looked at their strategy and we got them to think about their short term and focus on those 3 horizons, learning from the past, the present, and the future. They had a command and control style leadership. So they had a lot of people at that C-suite level, and it needed to evolve to much more devolve that responsibility down into the organization. We looked at their ways of working. So that, top-down approach, they need to think about the streamline. There was very little cohesion at that exec level. So we needed to think about how that team could work and how they'd stop thinking within their particular areas or their span of control and thought, as Craig has mentioned, driving that collaboration. So moving from less from a functional to much more of a flat structure in lots of ways. We looked at 3 models, so we gave them 3 opportunities. So a technical led, so that was from a medical lens, a product perspective, because they had a product that they were selling to B2C, to customers, and then a customer led model. Our recommendation was the customer led model because it really got them to focus and align their strategy on who their consumer ultimately was. And they had lots and lots of partnerships that were wanting results from that particular customer. And then we also suggested, when we looked at positions, new roles. So a role particularly within growth marketing, because they had nobody really taking ownership of the growth agenda in terms of marketing, somebody to oversee commercial and customer experience because they were split and the 2 weren't talking to each other and were doing completely different things, and actually making it much harder to grow. And then we looked at the segmentation and the opportunities for collaboration. So you can see in a very small space of time, we used all of our OD model. We created that future back approach, and we were able to give tangible outcomes and impacts to their business, which they overall, I would say probably 60% adopted. They made some big audacious changes as a result of it. So I would say the impact is still being felt within that business. So if you're going to try something like this, here are some questions to ask yourself. And you know, you don't necessarily have to ask yourself all of these, but first and foremost, where is this change coming from? Is it your board? Is it your CEO? You know, is your leadership team working collaboratively together? The example that I just gave you, they weren't working together. So we were called in by the board to help. You know, if you're VC backed or PE backed, is there a need to cost cut? Is it to streamline? You know, what's the ROI that people are looking for? You know, is the timescale realistic? You know, some of you were talking about acquisition. How does that kind of feed into that? Do you have budget? Do you have the capability? And how are you going to measure success? So when you're thinking about any OD project or program or change, think about these questions. And if you don't have the answers, then try and look at ways to get them, because if you can answer some of these questions, you're going to set yourself up for success from the start. And you might want to think about it. We've created a playbook around OD, but you might want to think about creating yourself an OD playbook that you can use. And this is what one of our clients has actually done, JISC Education. They've created a playbook that their business partners can use and their leadership can follow when they're doing any OD intervention. And it falls into four areas: assessment. So what are the diagnostics that you're going to use? How are you going to design this? How are you going to co-create those interventions, and who are the key stakeholders? What are the clear accountabilities around change, communication, engagement? And what are the simple metrics that matter to your business leaders? So if you can create a playbook around those elements, you can start to amplify your OD footprint within the organization really simply and really effectively. So that's the whistle-stop tour of OD. Hopefully we've given you an understanding of all of the model, why this is important. But here are some tools, because we always like to leave you with extra things. That's part of our values. So if you're thinking about positions and you're thinking about people, and this feeds into structure, ultimately, then you might want to download our strategic workforce planning guide. This a lot of the time we find with HR teams actually doing strategic workforce planning at the beginning before you do any change is a great way of working, whether you have a problem where your skills might be needed and what positions you might need to fill. So we've created a workforce planning guide that you can download, which gives you templates which you can use, but also examples of how you put that into practice. So please, it's our newest resource, so love you to download it, and we'd love to hear from you if it's been really useful. I talked about you creating your OD playbook. Well, we've created an OD playbook, OD playbook light, I would say, around the principles that we talked about. So our model for OD, so if you want to, again, download that, it gives you top tips for starting. It gives you questions that you might need to answer, and some tools and techniques to help you run any successful OD project. And finally, Craig and I are always up for a chat. The clues in the title of our business, Let's Talk Talent. So if you have an OD project that you'd like to discuss, you need some help, you just want some inspiration, you need some extra capacity, you want to upskill your HR team, then please feel free to book a call with Craig and I. It's not a hard sell. We're not going to try and sell you, but we're here to help you. And as our values say, kind people are our kind of people. So if you need help, we're here in any capacity that you might need. So you've heard from us. You've heard us eulogize about OD. It's one of our really cool topics, and something we feel very passionate about. Have you got any questions that you want to ask? I can see that people are saying thank you. You're so welcome. Any questions before Craig and I sign off and we let you go?
Lots of thank yous coming through, which is always nice. Thank you,
Yeah, really.
everyone for attending.
Yeah, we're really delighted that we've been really helpful. And please, we have other webinars coming up in the next month and over the summer. So please check out the website and do sign up. They're always full of hopefully inspiration and tips and tools, but also opportunities for you to connect and with other people in the network, to be honest with you. Brilliant. Well, look, have a wonderful Thursday. And when you get to it, if it's today's your last day before Friday, happy weekend, everybody. And we will see you in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.